I remember the first time I had to write a user story for software engineers. I stared at a blank screen for an hour trying to put everything I knew about the product into a few cohesive paragraphs of text. The problem is that you can't just sit and start writing. Instead, there are a lot of processes that lead us to this point, and I'll show you them right now. But do stay until the end because we will write actual user stories based on our example project. So let me give you the context of the project that we currently run. My team needs to create a software application for groups players, so I had a conversation with the project owners. Here's the business need.
Anyways, we have an extensive fan base and we expect that we can create an app that will help them have more fun.
Next, I learned that two big books describe all the main rules for groups, and it's like a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons. So, these books contain the requirements for our app. But these books are 600 pages long and we are very short on time. So, physically, we can't read and comprehend everything. So, instead, I ran a series of interviews with the real players of this game. It allowed me to narrow down our business analysis efforts, so I can focus on just 2, maybe 3 areas of these PDFs. Finally, I actually sat down and read the required chapters of these PDFs, and I tried to understand the game's mechanics and basic rules. So at this point, first you need to have a vision for a product. Then you literally need to draft a picture of the app in your head. It's the first draft, and it's just a starting point for any further discussions. So here's another problem. In the IT industry, your requirements are often closely connected with the user interface of your product or service. And even if you create a backend service with no UI, you still need an architectural design to give context to your conversations. That's why most of the time it makes sense to create a high-level idea of the UI concept first and describe it in user stories later. Use pen and paper if you don't know other tools, it's better than nothing. So now, how do you take these drawings and text from the rulebooks and convert them into technical requirements for software engineers? And we will use user stories, and I'll give you some examples right now. A user story has 3 main components: title, description, and acceptance criteria. The title itself consists of 3 parts, and it sounds like this. As a person or avatar, I want objective or action so that overcome a problem or need. For example, as a groups player, I want native navigation so that I can switch between the app's screens. Notice that we write from a user's perspective of our product, not from the developer or product perspective, and it's intentional. First, we deliver value to the users and show progress with each completed story. Second, we don't limit technical solutions for developers by specifying an approach. Here are several more examples of titles that describe, for example, Apple's in-app purchase feature for our product. As a groups player, I want to get a subscription prompt so that I can use the app. As a groups player, I want to get a monthly or annual subscription options so that I can optimize spending. As a groups player, I want to be able to cancel a subscription so that I can opt out at any moment. As a groups player, I want to be able to restore my purchases so that I can use the app on my other devices. But before we move on to descriptions and acceptance criteria, let's talk about epics, because you want to keep user stories organized and grouped by epics in the real world. The rule of thumb? Treat epics as big pieces of work that you need to break down into user stories. So, for example, all user stories from the previous example fall into the in-app purchase epic. Likewise, we'll have a login screen epic, range combat calculator epic, explosions calculator epic, and settings screen epic. So with epics, you don't need to pack too much information into the title to explain where this functionality sits in the app or what stakeholder requirement it covers. By the way, in the real world, epics and user stories with just titles are enough to kick off conversations between Scrum team, product owners, and other stakeholders. Together, you will work out the details. And here's what I want to stress out. User stories intentionally have few technical details, and we don't specify a solution here. Again, this way, as a result of our efforts, we will create something valuable and tangible for the users of the product. At the same time, the team will discuss and work out all technical solutions under the hood of the story. Alright, now let's talk about description. What should you put in the description of a user story? Good news, there are no rules here. You can use the description to provide additional information to the team to explain the need or value of a user story. In practice, you should consider putting the following into the description: UI designs when they are available, architecture diagrams, use cases, requests from customers, examples, any pictures, or any other information that will help implement the user story. You should treat the description of a user story as a collaboration space, so all team members can contribute here. At the same time, keeping description empty is also fine. But from a practical perspective, it's better not to leave it empty, but write something like "no additional details." This way you'll show you considered this field but couldn't add value rather than forgetting to put information there. Next, we have acceptance criteria for a user story, and it serves so many purposes. Describes what needs to be done to finish a user story. Explains the conditions we must meet to complete the user story. Sets expectations on what you'll get in the product. Specifies the main use cases that we must cover. And acceptance criteria are tricky because on one hand you can use general terms to describe what needs to be done. For example, for a login screen, we can write simple acceptance criteria like this. The user can get into the app with the correct login and password. If something is wrong or missing, show an error message. Something went wrong, try again. But on the other hand, you can apply professional business analysis techniques here, and in this case the same login page will have more acceptance criteria. For example, you'll describe the behavior of field validation or specific messages for different types of errors or placeholder text for those fields. But in practice, it depends on the complexity of the product you need to develop and whether or not you have a dedicated business analyst. Let's get through several more examples. So let's look at the wireframes and start writing out user stories. So I analyzed the documentation, and in our case it's GURPS rulebooks. There is a concept of successful roll. If you want to hit someone with a ranged attack, you must calculate a number based on all these rules. It's called the to-hit number. Then you roll 3 dice. If the total on the dice is less or equal to the number, you will succeed. So you see, essentially our calculator helps to determine this number that you need to roll the dice against. As a GURPS player, I want to see the calculated to-hit number so that I can quickly make the success roll. In the description I'll put the quotes from the rulebook. I do want developers to understand the business logic they work with. Then I'll add a link to the PDF itself and point them to the corresponding pages. That's in case someone needs additional information. I'll also add this ugly drawing to the ticket, but later I will replace it with mockups I will get from UI designers. So again, the description is for the context of the user story. Now, acceptance criteria will add more details to the implementation requirements, so I'll write the following. The to-hit number is always visible at the top of the screen, so it's visible even if we scroll down. The to-hit number is prominent and stands out from other areas of the application. To-hit number updates with each new option I select. Okay, that's it for now. Let's write another user story. The idea is that your to-hit number depends on the size of your target. So, for example, you don't get any bonuses if you shoot a human being. But if you try to hit a car, it's bigger and therefore easier to hit, so you get a better to-hit number. As a groups player, I want to use this size modifier so that I can accurately calculate the to-hit number. In the description, again, I'll link to the corresponding pages of the PDF and attach my drawings. By the way, that's an example where we need to collaborate with UI designers, because I didn't account for additional requirements described below this table. In the acceptance criteria, I'll write the following. I can select a value of the longest dimension and it will adjust the to-hit number with the corresponding size modifier. I can select additional shape modifiers and it adjusts the to-hit number with the corresponding value. Notice that I don't give definitive user interface descriptions here. A user story is a tool to initiate a conversation. The next step is to get the team together and review these user stories. That's why click on this video next, where you will see an example of a real-life discussion inside the team of these user stories. See you there!